Hey, how's everybody doing tonight? Thanks so much for joining me on a tuning extravaganza. This is a topic that I could talk about for a month of shows, really just a month, honestly. I love to tune drums. My college roommates were not fans of my tuning drums because I would sit in the middle of the living room or in my bedroom at 2 in the morning and ding, 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 ding. I would just constantly tap and tune drums. And that's why I'm such a fanatic about it. Now, it's really served me well because I'm able to do so much with the sound of a drum without having to put tape and this little damper and that little muffler on things. I can just tune things the way that I want them to sound. And that's a tremendous skill that I developed through annoying my college roommates for all those years, you know. I should apologize to them now, but I won't because they were difficult. Anyway, I really am glad to see you all here tonight. I'm happy to say that I'm fully vaccinated and got a couple more weeks to wait now before I can go out into the world. And I hope that you're all getting your vaccines and that everybody's staying safe. We can't forget that. Today's Earth Day. How about that? So we should celebrate our planet as well. I can dig that, right? You too? Excellent. So tonight, we're going to be talking about very basic tuning methods. At least that's how we're going to start this. I would love for you to comment, tell me your thoughts as you're watching things, and let's have a discussion about what you like to do with tuning drums. What I'm talking about tonight are my tuning methods, the way that I like drums to sound, the way that I like to approach drum sound in general. And so what I did was took some time and prepped 3 videos, videos that will show you guys in kind of a quick demonstration of my tuning methods. We're going to talk toms first because toms, if you can tune a tom, basically you're in a pretty good spot to be able to get your drums to sound good. Now, there's been some discussion that you can't tune drums, that drums are not tunable because they're not defined pitches, that you don't tune a drum head at all, you tension it. Okay, if that's the case, is it true then that we can't tune a guitar? Because how do you tune a guitar string? By tensioning it. How do you tune a piano? By tensioning it, and so on. Even trumpets and trombones, you change the tension, you change the amount of travel that the air has to do to tune the instruments. So I find that argument a little bit specious, but it's worth discussing if you guys feel that way. What's up, Keith Tenenbaum? Good to see you, my friend. Thanks for stopping by. I hope the countdown didn't bother you too much tonight. So let's talk about that. You know, can you actually tune drums? Can you tune drums to pitches? Does it matter? Is a drum out of tune if it's not tuned to a pitch? Again, does it matter? I think these are really valid questions that we need to talk about as drummers. Drummers, all too often, look at this thing and kind of go, yeah, okay, sounds good to me. And that's not how I operate at all. I want my drums to sound brilliant every time. For instance, tonight being a tuning video, I made sure that things were sounding good, but this drum is not sounding as good as I want it to for some reason. I must have missed something here. So let's find out about this. Please chime in. Don't forget, I've got to do the social media thing. I've been neglectful in this regard. So comment, follow, subscribe, like. And if right now you're watching this and you want to invite some of your friends, please do. I'd love to have more people to talk to. We've moved to the new page, of course, and a few people couldn't find us last week, so hopefully people are starting to find us this week, and it should be a fun show. So we're going to start tonight with the tom tuning video, and I will be here live, so if you comment while this video is playing, I will be here to monitor it, and I will be here to answer your questions. I am not going and getting myself an egg cream soda. If you don't know what that is, Google it. I love those things. So here's the one about tuning toms. Tom tuning basics. If you can tune a tom, you can tune a snare drum. If you can tune a snare drum, you can tune a bass drum. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the very basic idea of getting this tom in tune with itself. That trick Is it a trick? I don't know. There's some discussion that you can't even necessarily tune drums. We're going to talk about that live. But the question at hand is, how do we make this drum sound its absolute best? So we start with something that's very basic. Right now, this drum head is completely loose. That sounds good, right? So with this tom being this loose, we've got to take a look and take an inventory. Each one of, whoops, I hit my mic. Each one of these tension rods, that's what these are called, tension rods, go into lugs. Sometimes you'll hear these referred to as lugs, not necessarily incorrect. But these tension rods, these are what actually do the job of tuning a drum. So this is the buddy method, and it's one that I've used successfully for a long time, and I do this nearly every day of my life. There are other techniques and ideas, so if mine doesn't work for you, seek them out. I encourage you to do so. The trick is not to do it my way, it's to take the time to care about the sound of your drums. That makes all the difference. So if you happen to be someone like me who doesn't like a lot of damping and muffling on their drum at all, in fact, you'll note on this kit, the one that's over here, every time I ever play, you'll note there is no damping of any kind on my drums, on the toms anyway. Once in a while, I'll have a little piece on the snare drum. Not often, once in a while. So the real trick here is to find the fundamental note of the drum. DW does a really nice job of stamping the note inside the shell. So we actually have a starting point with every DW shell. So let's say, for instance, this one's E flat, and I would know that by tapping the shell, ding, 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 and finding the tone, and then I could walk over and play it on a piano, ding, 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 and find that note on the piano. That's why when people tell me toms don't have notes, I just think they're flat wrong. Every tom, every drum has its own note built right into the shell. So we find that note, and then we try to match the head to that ultimately to get the drum really, really singing. That's if you're looking for that singing sound like I am. So as a person who doesn't want muffling and damping on his tom, it's incredibly important that my drums are very, very in tune with themselves. So let's talk about that. The very first thing I do, my trusty drum key, I pick a tension rod. It doesn't really matter which one, but to me I tend to start to the left side of the logo here. So there's the Remo. And I make sure it's nice and loose. You're going to hear some people say you finger tighten them. I don't really do that because finger tightening can be different things to different people. My fingers might be stronger than your fingers or his or her fingers, and vice versa. So I would rather not have that little element of question built into mine. So what I do instead is I make sure that each one of the tension rods is completely loose, and all of these are, and start tapping about an inch away from the edge of the head, turning slowly until I hear the pitch bend up. Right there, did you hear that? No, not right, okay. So here we go. There's the pitch bend. Right there. So I stop on that one, and I come directly across and do the same technique. Same one. Then I move one tension rod to the left. Did you hear the pitch bend? Right there. Go directly across. So I've gone across, over, across. I like that. Over. Yeah, that's pretty good. Let's back that up. Right there. See, that pitch goes. So I'm looking for that whole step. Like so. Right there. Hear it? See, there's a pitch in there. And we come across to the final lug. Whoops. Voila, right? So now we should have the fundamental pitch. We should have the fundamental pitch of the drum right here just from doing that. But that doesn't work that way because drum heads are not perfect. Drum shells are not perfect. Drum rims are not perfect. My ear is not perfect. So here's what we do. We go back to where we began and we loosen it completely. Totally. Right? And we do it again on this lug. So let's see what we've got. starting where we began, we go tap around each lug 1 inch away. Oh, that's a mistake I was hoping I'd make, and I did. If you hit the rim, you have to stop, kill the head vibration, and start over. If you don't, you're going to get the rim shot, and the drums overtone is slightly different. So if you hit a rim shot, whoop, start over. Okay, so here we go. Hear the snare drums rattling in the background? I should turn that off. So what do you hear? Do you hear that it's going doom, 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 doom? Can you hear that? Take a listen. Oh, this one's a little wonky, right? But ultimately we get doom, 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 doom. Ultimately, this one's a little weird. So I'm gonna leave that sitting. This is how the patterns work. Think in terms of changing a tire. Going across the tire when you're doing the lug nuts. The same thing here. This drum, if you change the tension on this tension rod, it affects this one directly across from it. This one affects that one, and so on and so forth. So our job as drummers is to make the tension as even as possible across the drum. Typically, I work in pairs. This one happens to have done something a little weird tonight. That one's low. Can you hear that? Ding, dong, ding, dong, right? So let me bring that up to where it should be. Did you hear how much that changed the tension of the head, the pitch of the head? All I turned it was what, a quarter turn? Now we're getting dong, 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 dong. You hear that? So let's go across the drum, move over one, and I'm doing quarter turns. I'm not making big moves. These are small moves, Ellie. It's a Contact reference. If you haven't seen the movie Contact, go watch the movie Contact. Then you'll get the reference. This lug's still being a little wonky on me. Of course it would do that tonight. What is with that? So when you have a weird one, this is actually a good lesson moment. Undo that sucker. Completely loose. Let's bring it back up. So it went from totally dead, this is loose, to there's the whole step. Okay, so now I'm hearing that these two tension rods are lower than these four. So I want to tighten that one to make it a little higher, but that means I also have to tighten the one across from it, like so. Okay, now we got a slightly different pattern. Ding, 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 dong, right? So let's bring these two guys up a little bit. Now, we don't want to get into coffee can territory with the tension. And right now we're starting to approach that area. And it's really a matter of pressing down and learning the tension on the head. I can't really do that for you. That's something you have to do yourself. But if it feels, if it feels like your bicep, that's too tight, probably. Unless you're a jazzer who wants it really up high. So what I want to do now is bring the overall tension of the head back down. So I'm going to bring all 6 lugs, which you'll notice the pattern. I'm bringing them all down about a quarter turn. Let's see where we are. So we've got ding, ding, dong again, right? This is the dong, so these are the low ones. Still low. We'll bring those guys up. I really wish I'd turned that snare drum off. It's kind of bugging me. Maybe you can't hear it. Let's see where we are. Ah, okay, so now they're pretty even across the way, and we're not getting quite as much of a... It's still there. This one's still a little bit low, but not bad. So I'm doing 1 or 2 lugs at a time. Now this one's still a little bit low, so it's the same 2. Bring them up a little. We're getting there. Now we got these 2 a little low. Let's see where we are. And these are tiny moves. Okay, that's pretty close. Now, if I pick the drum up and give it a smack, that's a pretty solid fundamental tone. Doom, Nothing weird ringing. There's nothing odd going on. It's a fundamental tone that's very pure. And that's what we're looking for. Exactly that. So I don't have to put anything to deaden the heads because I don't have any weird wonky or overtones. I took the time to tune the head. The only way to get better at this is to sit down and do it. Exactly. So that's my philosophy on tuning toms. It's a complicated process that is made a lot simpler the more that you do it, and that's what I was trying to get across to you there. That drum was being a little bit of a pain actually because it had the one wonky lug, but I found myself having to think about it as I was trying to do the video and dropped that one tension rod and start over. That's just how it has to work sometimes. So I was really glad actually that it kind of did something crazy there. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you have any thoughts on it, particularly about how to achieve that even tone, that even tension? Because I, as you know, don't like to have damping and tape and whatnot on my toms. So I spend a lot of time getting good at this. So the questions that have arisen here are about the bottom heads. So I wanted to do this. This is exactly what I was hoping for. The bottom head itself, it works conversely to what you might expect. A tighter bottom head, meaning tighter than the top head, gives you a longer tone. A looser bottom head gives you a shorter tone. Why is that? The physics of the resonating body. When there's more tension on the body resonates longer, okay? So that's because the tension is what gives the resonant tone. Ultimately, I tend to tune with a bit of a higher bottom head and a slightly looser top head. Generally speaking, they're about a third or a fourth apart between bottom head dung dung, top head dung dung, bottom head dung dung, somewhere in there dung 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 dung, something like that. Because a perfect drum tuning scenario would be to have the top and bottom head the exact same pitch. That would be the longest tone because the two heads would resonate perfectly and vibrate at the same frequency and so on. So if you hit a perfectly tuned, exactly similar to same pitch top and bottom head, doom, it would just sustain forever. Now, we don't necessarily want that, right? I like a longer tone, but I also like a pitch bend effect. And that's something that I learned to do many years ago was by having that bottom head slightly higher than the top head, it goes doom. Let me give you a for instance. You hear how it bends off? Doom. Doom. Try the other. Doom. You hear that pitch bend? That's because the bottom head's slightly tighter than the top head. Like so. And it's a for me that's the sound that I like. So it's very important that you just use the same exact techniques that you had on that we did on the top head on the bottom. So it's the same cross pattern and making sure that all of the patterns are correct and so on. But the other side of that coin is knowing how the pitch relates to and how it affects the overall sound of the drum. Like so. I hope that makes some sense to you guys. If you have other questions about it, let me know. Toby went to the baked potato tonight. That's great to hear. Bernie Drezel was playing, and that's really cool. Barry Halevi, nice to see you, my friend. Everybody seems to be getting here now. It's good to see everybody here. Who else has joined us? It's good to see you here, Charles. I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks, man. And Reggie, I'm glad everything is going well with you. So let's talk a little bit about snare drums, because snare drums, are a pretty deep abiding passion for all of us drummer types. We have a thing for snare drums. All of us do. I've got, I don't know, about 30 of them in the room here with me because I always want that exact perfect sound. And don't panic, I've been collecting them for, a long time. So it's not like I went and grabbed 30 snares. I've just never gotten rid of one, or very rarely have I ever gotten rid of one. So I typically have just hung on to them, even if I never intend to play them again. They're on that wall over there, on this wall over here. You just never know what you might need. Hey, what's up, James Brantley? Thanks for stopping by tonight. It's really great to have everybody stopping in. So now let's talk a bit about, let me just see, where are we at here? Let's talk about snare drums. I'm going to play the video now, and we'll be right back. Yeah, Kevin, something like 30. I really, seriously, I never get rid of them, ever. I have not the very first snare drum I ever had, but I have the second and third ones, and I've just never stopped collecting them. It's a buddy privilege. That's pretty funny. Yeah, but it was me crawling under houses. Yes, that's my wife saying I have so many snares. I don't have enough though, do I, babe? I don't. All right, so let's take a look at this snare tuning. So we talked about tom tuning in the last segment. So this time we're going to talk about snare drum tuning. This is really more of a buddy's tips and tricks moment for you on snare tuning. You learned how to do cross tensioning and whatnot of the tom head, and we've talked about that live now. So I don't want to go back into that technique. If you have any questions about it, feel free to reach out to me, of course. But how do you deal with a snare drum? Because they are quite different in one respect, in that they've got snares that are designed to rattle in sympathy and make everybody crazy because they sound like that. Even when they're disengaged, they can be a problem. For instance, they're going to be worse now. See, I can make it sound like that. And so snares drive people crazy, right? I mean, how many sound engineers? Would you turn the snares off, please? Yeah, okay. So how do we tune them and deal with these? First of all, drumsticks. And I didn't tell you this in the tom video, so I'm going to say it now. When you're tuning your drums, don't use your fingers. Use the implement that you're going to be playing with. If you're using this as opposed to your fingers, you're getting the actual overtone of the drum instead of something that's coming off your finger. It's typically better to use the same implement. Anyway, so I've disengaged the snares, and now I'm lifting them off the head. And I'm gently sliding a stick across the head in between lugs so that I can do that same tap, tap, tappity technique. It's a little more challenging because you've got things you've got to contend with that are in the way, right? But snare beds live right here. Snare beds live right here in the shell of a high-quality snare drum. And snare beds are a flattened part of the snare shell that allow the snares themselves to sit flatter on the drum head. By doing that, you have more contact, which means you get more snare sound. So you won't always get a perfect pitch match in these four spots that are on either side of the snare beds. So remember that as you're trying to tune. Ultimately, get them close. Those three are close, but this one's going to drop. That one dropped. Actually, it's pretty close. This one was a little bit out. The point is, we're using the same exact cross technique while bridging the snare gap. That's how you handle having the snares across. Okay? Now, once you get it situated and you're happy, you engage your snares and you turn this thing back over. Now look, I can't stress this enough, okay? There's a lot of people in the world that like low-pitched snare drums, and I get that, but you need a tight bottom head. The tight bottom head is what allows these things to do their job. Unless you're going for a very, very specific snare sound with loose bottom head and loose snares, having a tight bottom head is what you're after. What does that feel like? Kind of like poking yourself in the forearm. That's about how tight that should be in the middle. That's about right. So that gives you a little something to consider. Be sure that the bottom head is tight. Now, I'm not saying, make it so tight that it goes pop and explodes the very moment you play it. I happen to like a tighter top head as well. So as you see, this one's been played a lot. I play this drum a lot. I've played this head a lot. It's a Remo Ambassador, coated Ambassador, and there is not a stitch of damping or muffling on the drum, because I tune the drum so that it's in tune with itself all the way around, just like we did the toms. One other small note here. The snares themselves, you can make them as tight or as loose as you want. Tighter is more articulate. Loose is a little more fat back, that sound that some guys like. Not my thing. Some guys dig it. Marching guys like myself, we like them up there. But one thing you need to do that I neglected to say in the tom video, so I'm going to say it now, is always damp the opposite side of the drum. Don't try to tune a tom or a snare drum with it sitting like this, because you get the ring and the resonance of the whole drum. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to isolate each head, each element, so that we can get it in tune with itself, okay? Don't forget that. This drum has a 40-strand snare wire from DW on it. I'm a big fan of the 40s. Not everybody is, but I like it, particularly on this drum. This is a solid shell snare that I felt reacted and responded better with more snares. Some guys like 20-inch or 20-strand snares. Those work too. But the real trick is to make sure your snares are in good shape. If you've got wires flicking around and all, and things that have popped off, take them off, throw them away, get some more. You're doing yourself no favor by having crappy snare wires. Let's make sure you've got good snare wires. Okay, so that's about it for Buddy's tips and tricks on snare drums. Tight bottom head. Make sure your snares are in good condition. Make sure that don't forget that the snare beds are going to give you a slightly different pitch at these four. And yeah, I guess that's about it for now. See you on bass drum time. Ah, bass drums, bass drums. They're so different, yet so much the same. In a lot of ways, they're just a really big tom. But we don't treat them that way, do we? Even me, Mr. I don't put any damping on my drums. Even me, I still tend to put some damping in my bass drums lately. That has not always been the case. In fact, for many years I didn't. But with the advent of the sledge pad, I've begun using it pretty well exclusively inside my bass drums. I like what it does. It lowers the fundamental a little bit, makes the drum a little more solid, and I don't have to fight some of the tuning demons that I had to fight before. And it's a really good piece of gear for what I'm doing. So how do we deal with tuning a bass drum then, if it's not exactly played like a big tom, even though it could be tuned that way? Well, ultimately, Bob Gatson put out a video many years ago that I saw and went, oh, that's brilliant. And I tried his tuning method, and it worked beautifully for me. So even the intro for this show was played using Bob's bass drum tuning technique, just to let you know how good of a technique it is. So this is his, not mine. And Bob is in ill health, by the way, and he's got quite a few of his incredible snare drum collection up for sale. I'm talking Holy Grail drums, some of the ones that we all look for that are very, very rare. He's got 10 of them. So look that up. Find his snare drum. If you're looking for something that's really unique, there it is. I need to buy a couple myself. It'll help support a good guy too. So anyway, back to his tuning techniques. Right now I've got the tension rods very loose, okay? If you put your finger, this is all quite different from the other ones, but if you put your finger right here in the middle, you can see wrinkles all the way around the drum. As soon as I lift my hand, the wrinkles disappear because the head actually reforms to its natural shape. But by pressing down, and look, I'm not pressing particularly hard. I'm not like that, but I am putting some pressure on it. So what I do here, pick a lug, just like with the tom, and I tune each lug, each tension rod, up until the point that the wrinkle disappears. And I go all the way around the drum and tune so that no more wrinkles. Across and over, just like with the toms, just like with the snare drum. Across and over, across and over. This doesn't seem all that different, except note that my hand is still pressing down in the middle of the head. And I'm just watching. I'm not tapping and looking. I'm watching. It's a very different thing from a tuning perspective, right? Across and over, across and over, across and over. That one's gone now. And then finally, this one. Okay, so now all the wrinkles are gone. You hear the head kind of crackling? Just as a little side note, that's not the plastic that's crackling. That is not the head trying to pull out. What that is in Remo drum heads in particular, they have a step design in the plastic. So when the rim pulls down on it, the step design conforms to the shape of your shell. So any imperfections in your shell are mitigated by the design of the drum head. Pretty cool. Just wanted a little sidebar there for you. So anyway, putting my fingers back in the middle here, I go back to where I started and I loosen all the way. And I tighten it back up to the point that I just feel a tiny bit of resistance. Guess what's happened? I've got a wrinkle. And I come back here and do the same thing. All the way around, loosen until there's just a tiny bit of resistance. And look at that. And I do that all the way around. Wrinkle. All the way around. Wrinkle. And when you get 2 or 3 done, you can actually start just backing off and you'll start seeing the wrinkles without having to take it all the way. That's just a little advanced thing for you. But I'm taking them all the way down. There it is, it wrinkled. And back to here. But notice I don't take it below the wrinkle point. Once it gets to the wrinkle point, I don't keep going. I make sure to tighten it back up just a skosh. But I still want to see the wrinkle. Still want to see the wrinkle. Never in a million years, by the way, would I have ever thought that I would tune a drum head with wrinkles in it intentionally. So here we are one more time. Bring it back up just a touch. And now I've got, you see those? We've got a few little wrinkles in various pockets around the drum. As soon as I lift my hand, the wrinkles disappear. And what do I have? But a very solid fundamental note on the bass drum. I'm going to lean this back a little. Hard to argue with that. Sounds great, right? And we'll talk some more about this in the live show too. All right, here we go. About snare drums, let's back up to that a little bit and talk about that. I made a comment that has been somewhat controversial in the past, where you have to have a tight bottom head. What I of course don't mean that it needs to be so tight that it can't breathe, but so often I see people doing so many just vile things to snare drums, where they'll tape the snares or they'll shove some sort of sock or some sort of padding underneath the head or things like that. It's one of those situations where if you just take the time to bring the pitch of the bottom head up on the snare drum, you can control the actual pitch of the drum and what you're hearing as far as pitch is concerned from the top head. So just as a for instance, this is this snare drum here. I'd call that a medium-high pitch. So I've got my trusty drum key, and I'm going to just 1/4 turn, and I wouldn't recommend doing this, I'm just making a point here. 1/4 turn on half the lugs. Why not? Let's just see what happens. Right? It's a lower pitch. I didn't touch the bottom head and only did half the lugs. What about if I do the rest of them? And this is only a 1/4 turn on DW True Pitch 50s, so it's more like an 1/8 of a turn on a normal drum. So what about that? Oh, sorry about that. What? So that's a lower pitch. All I did was change the top head. The bottom head doesn't control the pitch, and that's a great example of that. I'm going to bring this back up because that's way too low for me. Of course it is. The snare beds on the bottom, metal shell snares don't have them, at least not at the same level. They can sometimes have a slight snare bed in them, and it's a little easier to tune the bottom heads to be perfectly in tune with themselves. I'm going back over here to some of the comments that I'm seeing. Maple goodness, yeah, John Bay. Good to see you, John Bay. Thanks for stopping in tonight. I'm glad to see you here. Toby asked, how often do they need to be tuned? Is it normal wear and tear, hours played? It is all of that, yes. I think Kevin down here kind of answered that with it depends on how hard you hit the drum, the weather, the humidity, many factors. That's all part of how often they need to be tuned. I tend to tune, if I'm recording session, I tune between every song, oftentimes between every take, just to touch up, just to make sure. That's not to say that they necessarily fall out of tune, but I'm going to check them. It's also the case that, yes, how hard you hit, the wear and tear. I mean, when you hit a drum head, it stretches, and they're designed to take a lot, and they do take a lot, but over time they do break down. So you'll need to, once the elasticity is worn out of them, you'll need to replace them, and that's something you get a feel for the longer you play. Oddly, they get more brittle and rigid feeling as the elasticity leaves them. So that can be a little more challenging, and they don't feel good. There's a very definite feel. I know drummers are very aware of that. Thank you, John Bay. I appreciate that you can hear me. That's good. Hey, Brian O'Shab, nice to see you. Brian is the lighting designer that's got this room looking this good. He's done a great job with it. He also is the guy that created the intro, that incredible intro for the show, which is really good. Let's see. Oh, look at that. Odie's here. I didn't see Odie. How you doing, Odie? Good to see you. I was supposed to call you this week and never did. I even had a reminder on all of my calendars to call you. Yeah, John Bay, I don't know if the buddy hug is a thing anymore with in post-COVID world. That's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. But, I need to give them as much as you need to get them. So it'll probably be a thing. Anyway, I tend toward having my snare drums a little tighter because I like the articulation of that. I like the fact that it gives a little bit sharper edge to the attack of the drum, especially if I'm playing that sort of halftime groove or whatever. If I'm doing something of that nature, I like to have a little more attack because that just feels right to me. That's part of it. If I'm doing a session for somebody that wants a super low pitch thing, there was a session I did for an American Idol cast off. She was a top 12. She made about halfway up through that, but we were doing her record, and the producer wanted the deadest snare drum I've ever played. I almost couldn't handle it. It was detuned to the point of almost no tension on the head and the wallet. I mean, it was just like playing a giant pillow, and it was not my favorite thing to play, but it sounded good. So that's what's up. Oh, that's nice. Thank you, Odie. Thank you. Odie's letting me off the hook for not calling him this week. I appreciate that. What's your thought? What are your thoughts on snare drum tuning? Do you do that? Do you do a tight bottom head? Maybe you're a loose bottom head guy. Maybe you can help me understand why. Or when I say guy, I mean that colloquially, very definitely. But I'm curious what you do with your snare drums. Bass drums, who was that said that? I think it was Charles that said that. Sound and Design, Bob Gatson, that's exactly right. That was a fantastic DVD. I will say, when I saw him using the hairdryer to seat the heads, that was a bit too far for me. But yes, it was a great video, obviously, or I wouldn't keep tuning the way that I do. The bass drum thing is very different. I am not someone that thinks of myself as being particularly good at tuning bass drums. I tend to like them to sound like big toms, and that is not exactly what a lot of people dig, right? So it's incredibly important for me to tune in a modern, punchy sort of way. So on the batter side, I do exactly what I showed you, where I push in, and I can't stress this enough either. I don't push hard. I push just enough to see wrinkles, and then I try to maintain that pressure so that I can loosen all the tension rods until I'm seeing wrinkles all the way around the drum. Okay, so when that happens, when I first learned that, I just couldn't believe it. I really thought, nah, this is lame, man. This is lame. But it turned out to be quite good. And every drum that I play now, including this one, is tuned using that technique and that method. Let's see. Odie, which hoops do you prefer, triple flange or die-cast? 100%. I do not like die-cast hoops. They dry out the drums for me too much. These are, what does DW call these things? True hoops. These are triple flanged but more rigid. So they kind of bridge the gap between die-cast sound and stability and triple flange sound and stability. So for the uninitiated that might be watching this, a die-cast hoop is in fact cast in a die. It's typically made out of aluminum, not always, but they're very, very rigid and very, very strong. That sounds like a good thing. However, on a drum, when you have that rigidity, it can dry out the sound and make the sound a little shorter. That's not a bad thing. It's a different thing. Gretsch has made a living off of that forever and ever and ever. A lot of companies use die-cast hoops. For me, the triple flange, this is more closely resemblant to, this triple flange is a little more flexible, which gives the drum head a little more room to vibrate and give a longer tone. And as we established early on, that's my kind of sound, is that longer tone. So that Odie is what I prefer, man. Is the triple flange or these true hoops. I'm a fan of those as well. Charles, I like medium to tight tune snare depending on the type of shell. Okay, that's a great point. Depending on the shell. This one is a black over brass, the Black Cutie from D-Dub, and I agree. This drum tends to be a little bit on the dark side sonically, so I don't mind tuning it up a bit to brighten it some. The one from the video, it being solid shell, I find it brighter and have those 40s, that 40 strand. Do I have a 40 on this? I do not. I have a 20 on this. So a 40 strand on the other one. That brightens up that drum as well. So I like to push that envelope. I tend to lean away for something like the 8-inch tom. A lot of people don't love 8s. They're just so high pitched. Well, I do the opposite. My 8 is pitched right about where a normal 10 would be. I don't pitch it up super high. Right? So by having it pitched down just a little, it gives it a little bit more of of a longer sound. So I find the drum infinitely more useful. And you see the 10 is now living where a typical 12 might, but I'm not somebody who's trying to detune. That's not my case at all. I consider myself a medium tension tuner, just in general, just so you know. And they do sound quite good. James Brantley, how you doing? How's everything in Mississippi? In my opinion, one drummer is not too tight, could still be pretty tight. Absolutely, it's subjective word. It's a subjective word maybe. If it sounds good, it's likely tight enough. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's the point I was trying to make when I was trying to give, some sort of semblance of poke your arm and maybe if this is how tight it is or whatever, that it's too tight or whatever. A bottom snare head, I'm pretty militant about the bottom snare because as I said, I've just seen so many terrible things done to snares with tape and all of that. And all you got to do is tighten up that bottom head to a point where it feels, I'm not flexing here, but I'm also not totally slack either. So kind of a bicep-y kind of things. I mean, it's challenging. I will grant you that. Maybe it feels like a piece of fried chicken or something. That's kind of what the bottom feels like. Thanks, James. I'm glad you like it, man. I really like this snare drum too, just for the record. So moving on back to the bass drum thing, because of the sound that I like, and versus the sound that producers tend to like, or that the general listening public tends to like, I do something a little different with the front head. The front head is the resonant side. So with everything I've said, I always keep everything tighter than the batter. So bottom is tighter than top. Bottom is tighter than top. On the bass drum, it's the other way around. So I have the batter head tuned exactly like it was done in the video, and the front head is almost just hanging on. I don't have it loose enough that it rattles, but it's almost there. And what I have found that does is it creates a really short, compact sound. This is an 18-inch deep drum, and I know they're not in vogue right now. I don't care. I love the sound of an 18-inch deep drum, and I'm probably going to keep playing them for a long time. Because that sound is something that I was looking for a long time. Every shallower kick drum I ever played didn't quite give me that depth that I wanted. So having that has really helped give me a little bit more tonality, yet I can cut the notes short by loosening that front head. And by the way, that was something I learned. I was in a drum shop in Atlanta, Georgia, many years ago, and I played a bass drum. It was a Noble and Cooley. And I remember when I played that drum, I just had to sit down because it sounded so good. And so I started talking to the guys at the store, how did you do that? And that's how they did it. The batter side is a slight bit higher than the resonant side out front. That's how that works for me. Also, as I said, I tend to like a full front head with no hole. This one does have a hole. I know you can't see it. It does have a hole. It has a kick port in it. I'm still a fan of the kick port. And when miking up the drum, it really makes a difference. On top of that, it has a sledge pad inside it. Now, I went 15 years with nothing inside my bass drum. Maybe longer than that. Long time. And ultimately, I just couldn't bring myself to put a bunch of pillows and stuff. I want the drum to sound like a drum. And when sledge pad came along, I was resistant, to say the least. And my friend Renee Beavers, I don't know if Renee's here or not, but Renee kept telling me about it. So Renee brought one to my house and said, try this thing. And I was knocked out. So it didn't take long before I had a closet full of them. And now every one of my kick drums has a sledge pad in it. So I'm a big fan of the sledge pad and what it does. It didn't change the drum fundamentally to make it sound less like a drum. What it did was dry out the sound and make it a little punchier and gave it some weight. I haven't figured that part out yet. I have not yet figured out how the weight factor comes from a piece of foam. And by the way, it just looks like a piece of foam. But when you talk to Mike, the owner of the company, he spent a long time working out the perfect, Keith, man, seriously? That's just bad. Anyway, Mike, the guy that created the sledge pad, he really worked hard on getting the perfect combination of foams, various foams, the length being 1/8 of an inch different, changed the whole thing for him. So it was a very big deal. So don't write it off if you do see one to it just being a piece of foam. It's not. So enough about the commercial there. I didn't mean to do that. However, it's my show. I can do what I want. Anyway, so the sledge pad has been a revelation for me. That's the thing. Well, now Kevin's in on it. See, you guys, see, this is how it goes. Anyway, what are your thoughts on your bass drums? What do you do? What do you put inside yours? Is anybody else here using a sledge pad? Is it just me? I'm curious. What do you do? Reggie, I have the DW pads in my bass drum. Yeah, those are certainly popular. I obviously didn't use them because I had nothing in my bass drums. And even for me to have a hole in my bass drum head is a pretty big deal. I'm definitely an old school guy when it comes to bass drum sounds and whatnot. The way that I tune is personal for me, and my sound is something I took a long time to develop through the years, and I'm pretty happy with it. I'm very pleased with my gear. I love the sound of my gear, and it's become something that's more and more an extension of of my mind and my musical spirit. And I hope that's ultimately what we're trying to do, right? Is we want to express ourselves musically. And so if you tune exactly the opposite of the way that I do and it works for you, awesome. That's what we want. We want this to be authentically ourselves, and that's incredibly important. Charles, if South Africa had the sledge pad, you'd try it. Well, that's a thought. I hadn't really considered that for sure. The towel touching is a time-honored way of muffling, that's for sure, of damping a kick drum. So yeah, totally see it, man. Perhaps we can get you a sledge pad. I don't know if Mike sees this, but I'll certainly see. Oh, hey, there's my niece, Hope. How you doing, Hope? What are you doing up? It's really, really, really late where you are. So anyway, I'm going to sign off tonight. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me. And if you have questions, you know how to get me. I'm always very easy. Reggie, I bought one of the PDP Concept maple snares the other day. While tuning it, I took the snares completely off, and I'm having a hard time getting them back. Oh, boy. Okay, so yeah, I don't know exactly which throw off you have. I'm not sure which one. So I'm gonna pick this up. And all right, so the way that I do it, and again, this is my thing, is I throw off the snare and let it hang, and then I sit. I'm trying to do this so that you can see. So I will keep the snare drum flat, okay, and then put these in the middle, right where I want them, with it disengaged. Put the butt end on first. This is what I do. Tighten it down with this exactly where I want it. Then with this disengaged, am I saying that enough? Put the connecting, whatever it's plastic or nylon cord or whatever, I will connect that into the opposite side, the throw-off side, and it should be right where it goes, and then flip and you're in place, okay? Okay, so I think that will do the trick for you. If not, send me a vid of it and I'll help you out. No problem. Sorry about all the microphone jostling here. So yeah, that's cool. Let's see. Kevin, yeah, I think I did tell you about the sledge pad. You should definitely check it out. I'm pleased with what it does sonically. I was surprised. It looked like a piece of foam. It's not. So give that a shot. Anyway, thanks again for hanging in there with me tonight through the technical question marks, and we'll get it fixed for next week. See you on Twitch, 5 minutes until 9 o'clock. So 5 of 9 until 5 after 9, Saturday night. Come join me over there, Twitch. I'm Buddy Gibbons over there, and easy to find. It should be a lot of fun. The Twitch Storms, if you're not familiar, they do social media influencers, which I'm not, but they do social media influencers for 24 hours. And I have been invited to participate, so I'll be doing some banging on things for about 10 minutes Saturday night. Otherwise, I'll see you next week when my guest will be Mr. Ty Dennis of the Doors of the 21st Century. So I'm looking forward to having Ty on the show next week. He is going to be a great guest. Good guy. Looking forward to that. Until then, I will see you around.